It is a fraud. It is a lie. It is all fake news. So the professional Trump haters and the fake news media, they have yet done it again. And earlier today, BuzzFeed News reported a salacious story about Michael Cohen and President Trump, alleging that Cohen briefed Trump about a building project in Moscow numerous times and that the president directed Michael Cohen to lie about the existence of that project when it had already been well known. Now, the story allegedly sourced two anonymous federal law enforcement officials. As it turns out, this report was total fake news. Everyone at BuzzFeed tonight should be ashamed of themselves. But moments ago, the Office of Special Counsel, they actually issued a statement. They wrote, quote, BuzzFeed's description of the specific statements to the Special Counsel's office and characterization of documents and testimony obtained by this office regarding Michael Cohen's congressional testimony are not accurate. Not accurate. But are we really surprised? Oh, and it even gets better. The editor-in-chief of BuzzFeed is actually standing by the reporting which the FBI, the special counsel, completely refutes. Watch this.
The special counsel issued this very vague statement. We are eager to know what he's talking about.
Do you stand by the reporting that you guys published, which is a scoop that no one else has or has confirmed?
Yes, as we wrote, we have two federal law enforcement officials, and no game plan with those titles, who have told us that President Trump directed Michael Cohen to lie to Congress about negotiations to build a Trump Tower in Moscow.
All right, a bold stance from one of the leaders in fake news, and it gets even worse. Now, remember, this is the same BuzzFeed News, supposedly, that published the phony Hillary Clinton, bought and paid for, steal Russian dossier, and they never, ever tried to corroborate any of the details. And guess what? The latest devastating report contained no direct corroboration. I've been watching this all day, and one of the BuzzFeed reporters who actually broke the story even admitted he never actually saw the evidence that were referenced by his anonymous sources. Well, now watch this.
You have two law enforcement sources who tell you that they have seen evidence. Have you seen any of that other corroborating evidence?
No, I've not seen it personally, but the folks that we've talked to, the two officials that we've spoken to, are fully 100% read in.
All right, so there's two reporters for BuzzFeed. The other reporter responsible for this story is a guy by the name of Jason Leopold. He actually contradicts his co-author. Watch this.
Now, your colleague, who you wrote the story with, says that neither of you, when you talk about those documents, that you guys haven't actually seen them. You haven't seen the documents, the texts, the emails, et cetera. So how confident are you that they actually exist, that this is true?
I don't think that we've said we haven't seen them. And we have been... I'll just say that we've seen documents. We've been briefed on documents. We're very confident.
You think that the two authors could get their story straight before appearing on national TV? Now, this was known earlier in the day. Now, getting stories right is not a strength of Jason Leopold. Now, in 2006, this so-called reporter, well, the Columbia Journalism Review all but pretty much called him a liar. The review wrote that he would get stories completely wrong. We knew that today. And, quote, even make up stuff with stories that had no sources at all. Well, it looks like he's done it again, all in a blatant effort to destroy President Trump. It's sad. But what's even really worse, even fake news, CNN, and conspiracy TV, MSNBC, well, they go with the story, but they're constantly, they put in this caveat over and over again. And this is what we heard all day long. Unverified. But if it's true, with a level of hysteria and excitement. And then, of course, how many times do they mention impeachment? Look at exactly what I mean.
The story, which has not been confirmed by NBC News.
We should note CNN has not independently confirmed BuzzFeed's reporting, nor, for that matter, has anyone else. An explosive new report that, if true,
If you believe the reporting,
if this is confirmed,
if all of this is true,
If true,
we don't have sourcing that confirms this story, but we're not getting steered off of it.
we don't know for sure. You said you couldn't corroborate this. If true,
this is a potentially very big development.
if it's true. If true. Oh. Now, despite all these red flags, many others in the mainstream media breathlessly, hysterically pushing this fake phony, fraudulent story, and of course, predicting Trump's imminent impeachment, as they always do, for 2 years. Take a look.
Still no reaction this morning from President Trump to a report that ties him directly to the very same offense for which the House of Representatives moved to impeach Richard Nixon.
That appears that if true, he'd be guilty of suborning perjury, potentially obstruction of justice. It seems like an impeachable offense. It's exactly the kind of thing that drove Richard Nixon from office.
This report is a huge deal, and you know these are very credible reporters. We're deep in the realm now of credibly impeachable offenses.
There are an awful lot of similarities between a couple of the articles of impeachment against Nixon and the elements of this story.
Impeachment would actually allow him to at least do what he loves, which is to be a snowflake and pretend he's the victim and the Democrats are this and that. But at the end of the day, I think the impeachment process, if these facts are corroborated in today's report, I actually just don't see how Congress can do anything else.
All right, you would think by now the so-called journalists in the echo chamber, the extension of the Democratic Party, would have learned their lesson. They have been burned so many times before in the last 2 years. Remember the short-lived hysteria about NPR's fake Don Jr. story? Remember the hype surrounding Michael Cohen's so-called secret Prague trip? It never happened. Or the Guardian's false reporting about Paul Manafort? Or when 3 CNN fake news staffers, they were forced to resign after reporting fake news about our friend Anthony Scaramucci. Look at the list we have compiled. Fake story after fake story. Now, the Washington Examiner put this together. 47 printed pages for 1 year alone against Donald Trump of fake news that they breathlessly report. Unbridled, remember what I said at the beginning of the year, hatred of the president. So many forced corrections, but then they just keep doing it again and again. How many anonymous sources, hearsay, rumors? Do you think any of this is good for the country? Are they looking out for your security, the economy, a better job for your children, a better future for our grandkids? You know what? Right now, one more notch in the old fake news belt. It is beyond disgusting, but you just saw it all day. People screaming, impeach, impeach, impeach. This is all the hate that we get, as I've been saying, every second, every minute, every hour of every day from the Democrats, the hate Trump press, and of course the deep state. Now, all of a sudden today, the hate Trump media was concerned about obstruction of justice. That's what they wanted you to believe today. But they're the same people who gave Hillary Clinton a pass. It's been almost 2 straight years of never-ending conspiracy theories, fake news hatred, not just for the president, though, but also for the people that voted for this president. I've said it since 2007 and 8. Journalism in America is dead and it is buried. And driven by an unprecedented pathological hatred for the president, the bias in this country has become more important than what is fact, what is reporting, rumors more important than sources, as reckless speculation rules the day. Now, we told you that the situation is urgent. This is beyond shocking. Now, today's Speaker Pelosi and other top Democrats, once again, they tried to just skip out of town. A week-long international excursion, which would have guaranteed the your dime in a U.S. military aircraft. But now, after her new plans were leaked, sparking security concerns, Pelosi's overseas voyage has once again been postponed indefinitely. Now, maybe she'll accept what is the president's daily invitation to negotiate safety, security in our country and the government shutdown. Now, a spokesperson for the speaker actually blamed the president, of course, for the leak, an allegation the White House has called a flat-out lie. So here we are today, 28 days into a government shutdown, and the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, the most powerful Democrat in the country, is trying desperately once again to leave town, refusing to negotiate yet again. Remember, she took her lengthy tropical vacation at the beginning of the shutdown. Dozens of other Democrats, they had a luxurious vacation paid for by lobbyists in a chartered aircraft to Puerto Rico, while Pelosi and Schumer sent aides to negotiate with the Vice President of the United States instead of helping the furloughed employees and creating more security that they did support 4 years ago. So tonight, we've got to ask some really important death to even talk to the president. Does she care about the 90% of heroin in this country coming across our southern border, or the gangs, or the cartels, or the human trafficking? She won't even talk to the how many sexual assaults, how many violent assaults. Now, the president tweeted today, I will be making a major announcement concerning the humanitarian crisis on our southern border and the shutdown tomorrow afternoon at 3 p.m. live from the White House. He's working on Saturday. In the meantime, President Trump is ready, willing, able to negotiate, and has been since day one of the shutdown. Democrats have offered nothing except $1. No negotiations, no compromise, no time with the president. They just sit back and do nothing. Hundreds of thousands of government employees are not receiving their pay. The speaker is having a meltdown about not getting to take a government-funded trip on your thousands of lives have been lost, thousands more funded trip. That's where her mind is tonight. But fear not, let not your Pelosi, while
that ass.
You know what? Maybe it's time for the Speaker of the House to actually start listening to the American people, start solving problems, stop appealing to your radical base. In other words, really simply, you need to do your job. The president, his door is wide open. Go negotiate a deal. Maybe you'll get some of the things you say that you want. Secure the borders, reopen the government, and for goodness sake, get out of your ivory tower. If not, the president, well, he'll just act without you. Now, let's not lose sight of the fact of what we're fighting for. Don't be fooled by all the Trump haters. The crisis at the southern border is not manufactured. In fact, as you can see, a brand new migrant caravan marching toward our southern border as we speak. Earlier today, thousands of migrants poured into southern Mexico. After authorities there, they just left the gates at the border wide open. Mexican border guards didn't show up until sunrise, or actually after sunrise. So now, while Mexico may be embracing open borders, the president, he's continuing to stand strong, stay on the job, waiting to negotiate, waiting to keep his promise to secure the border of this country. This is about life and death. He tweeted today, quote, another big caravan is heading our way. Very hard to stop without a wall. And the fact is, we have an actual crisis on our southern border. Just look at this video from Border Patrol in the Yuma sector in Arizona, where nearly 400 migrants apprehended at once today after crossing illegally. That is not manufactured. That is the reality. We need these physical barriers, which are effective all across the world. Remember yesterday, also in Arizona, a group of migrants, they were caught trying to tunnel under a wall. But because there was a wall, they couldn't just walk across and flee law enforcement. And once they tunneled through, they were promptly caught. The wall works. Now, don't expect to hear any of this from the hate Trump media. As you can see from tonight's BuzzFeed, huge, massive embarrassment. The fake news epidemic has never been worse. And by the way, it all surrounds one thing, their hatred of all things Donald Trump. And by the way, Trump supporters. And that's why they all completely ignored what was major news that we had this week about the deep state, about FISA abuse. And meanwhile, we've been one of the only programs reporting these latest developments. And needless to say, it was a bad week for some of those embedded inside of our government that don't like the president. We learned under James Comey's watch, his general counsel, we learned this week, James Baker is now under a criminal investigation. And according to John Solomon's reporting, and don't forget, Andrew McCabe, his deputy, is also under a criminal investigation. And John Solomon pointing out that James Comey and others were all briefed about the phony dossier back in August. They were told by Bruce Orr, according to his sworn testimony that we only got this week, that he told all of them in the FBI, all of them in the State Department, oh, Hillary paid for it, and Christopher Steele hates the president. Oh, and by the way, they put this thing together, and I wouldn't trust it. But in spite of that warning, they went ahead anyway. And as the Grassley-Graham memo pointed out, the bulk of information was used in the FISA warrant. That would be a conspiracy to commit a fraud against the court. We also know Andrew Weissman and another Mueller investigator. They were also briefed on these warnings. They knew it was biased and unverified. Hillary paid for Russian lies to influence the 2016 election. But still, Mueller used it as a basis of his investigation, but never investigated Hillary, who bought it. Now, we've been warning you for months. This is the biggest abuse of power corruption scandal in modern American history. And by the way, the news media can be biased in other ways, like what they don't report. Joining us now, the author of The Case Against the Democratic House Impeaching Donald Trump, Harvard Law Professor Alan Dershowitz, Fox News contributor Sarah Carter. Professor, you know, what I really like about you is, even in your new book, even though you've been ostracized from the Martha's Vineyard crowd, and I'm sorry about that, I know it's actually been hurtful to you, you just continue to point out criminalizing political differences, waiting for truth and fact, and you see this happen now. I got 47 printed pages for 2017 alone. Fake news stories that the media has peddled hysterically to the American public. To me, it's a danger to the country.
Look, I agree. The American Civil Liberties Union is dead in the water. Civil libertarians don't seem to be concerned about these issues. And I have a responsibility as a 50-year civil libertarian to speak out about these issues, whether it involves Hillary Clinton or President Trump. Look, on the BuzzFeed thing, before the announcement was made by the special counsel's office, I posted a piece on the New York Daily News raising all kinds of skepticism, asking hard questions about the BuzzFeed report. It did not seem credible to me, particularly the arguments that it's like Richard Nixon. It's not like Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon, on tape, told his subordinates directly to lie about criminal activities, break-ins, etc. And here, of course, there's no credible allegation that there are emails or there are eyewitnesses, and I pointed that out in my article, and now my view has been confirmed. Look, I have to tell you, my views on this investigation have been confirmed over and over and over again. I've been right, and many of the get Trump at any cost people have been wrong over time. So I think it's about time that we stop substituting wishful thinking. You know, it's wishful thinking. The get Trump at any cost people wish to find evidence to impeach him, and they substitute wishful thinking for careful legal analysis and careful factual analysis, and the victims are the American public. We have a right to be informed of the facts, and I think credit is due to Mueller and his team for putting out a statement, rebutting this, and saying, even though it might help his investigation for people to believe it, it's not true. So I give 2.5 cheers now for Robert Mueller and his team for pointing out that BuzzFeed's
he could have done it many other times that he is not. But I'll concede on the point tonight.
That's why I gave you 2.5 cheers.
And his team has, you know, you don't hire Hillary Clinton's attorney as part of your team, or Strzok and Page and then erase their phones, or Andrew Weissman with his track record either. Sarah, let me go to you. The mantra all day was, it's not verified, but if true. Now, this was coming mostly from the media, mostly from the Democratic Party. The word impeachment mentioned all day. the American people fed a heavy dose of lies all day long. But this keeps happening again and again.
Yes, Sean, this is nothing new, and it's so unfortunate because it's a disinformation campaign. Let's talk about these BuzzFeed reporters. They can't even agree whether they saw the documents or not. One says they never saw documents. The other one, he comes out and says, yeah, well, we didn't really say that. We saw the documents. So from the get-go, we know there was a problem with this story. I agree with Alan Dershowitz. The same thing when I read the story. They never actually attributed anything to the documents. It seemed like their sourcing was very flimsy. Everything about that story seemed false. But this disinformation does an extraordinary damage to our national security and to the administration. Think about what's been going on. I mean, the trip Michael Cohen supposedly took to Prague that we found out was a lie. Stories over and over again filled with disinformation. But yet the stories that John Solomon and I and several others reported on Bruce Orr were based on fact.
It was the biggest blockbuster so far. This week's reporting. On top of everything you've done for a year and a half.
Yeah, and so multiple sourcing, actual documents that were verified, and multiple sourcing before any of those stories were published. Yet it was not heard anywhere else in the media at all, hardly at all. You didn't hear about it on any of the other networks. There is something very wrong here. This is detrimental to our democracy and to our country, and the American people are being ill-served. Something really needs to change.
It's what they don't report. You're right. All the stories that you have broken, and again, we've verified everything. Because if we get one thing wrong, we will be obliterated by the opposition party, the media.
On the Orr thing.
Yes.
On the Orr thing, as a civil libertarian, I am so distressed as a civil libertarian that Orr would have told everybody who had to know that this was a report that shouldn't be trusted, that it was a report done by a biased source, and then to submit a request for a warrant to the FISA court without disclosing that information is so unethical and so improper. You know, it's an ex parte proceeding. That means you have a special obligation to be truthful. Look, only 1/3 of 1% of FISA applications are turned down. And that's why it's so important for the prosecution to be credible with the FISA court. And this information about Orr is devastating because it demonstrates that they did it deliberately. They knew the information and they purposely withheld it, and that requires a very careful investigation by bar associations and by the by counsel.
Wouldn't this be, with that knowledge ahead of time and the bulk of information in the FISA warrants, everybody that signed down to that, wouldn't that be a conspiracy to commit fraud on a court by omitting important information like it was paid for by Hillary and then going as its gospel truth, having never verified or corroborated at all?
Well, I think it might constitute a contempt of the court. Whether or not we can find a criminal statute requires looking at the statute. I don't want to criminalize political differences, but I think it's a contempt of the court when you deliberately and willfully withhold information from the court and thereby mislead the court into granting a warrant.
Why do I think
they
I'd
might
be in
otherwise
jail?
not
Even
have
if I had
granted.
you as my attorney, I think I'd be in jail. Sarah, we're going to give you the last word.
Oh, I get you out. I get you out, Sean.
Oh.
But when you weaponize the courts to go after a political opponent, there is something drastically wrong, and that is something that should not be allowed, is not acceptable in our system of justice, and it's the reason why so many people come to this country. And if we break away from our basic foundation, then we might as well give up what we stand for and our principles that this country was founded on, Sean, and that's unacceptable.
This is hurting the country. They will. The news media will never, ever, I think, if possible, get away from the branding now of fake news. I think this seals it. Professor, thank you. Sarah Carter, thank you. Joining us now, a host of Life, Liberty, Levin, every Sunday night, the #1 show right here on Fox News. I call him the Great One, Mark Levin. Mark, I'll let you go, but the one thing I'll say to start is how fascinating today Democrats and the media actually cared about, quote, obstruction of justice when they've ignored, let's see, deleting subpoenaed emails, acid washing hard drives, and busting up devices and removing SIM cards. That never impressed them. But only if it's Trump do they get all worked up about something.
Well, it never will impress them. But I want to make a point here, Sean, about Mueller's office. They sat there all day long while this false reporting was going on, while the president was being smeared, while the reporters, so-called, and their friendly Democrats on Capitol Hill were saying this is an impeachable offense. They won't be held to account. They won't apologize. They'll continue on tomorrow to the next great fake story. But I want to say this about Mr. Mueller's office. They didn't do anybody any favor. I will tell you why they issued their statement around 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time tonight. Because I was on the radio, among other things, demanding that the Attorney General of the United States, Mr. Whitaker, and the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, Mr. Rosenstein, immediately launch a leak investigation. Because if these reporters, these two clowns, were right, of course they weren't, but if they were, the only place these documents, texts, and emails could have come from was Mr. Mueller's office. And they issued their statement, 7:30, give or take, tonight, Eastern Time, not because the story was accurate, it was inaccurate, but because if you conduct a leak investigation, you sit down Mr. Weissman, you make him undertake a lie detector test, and you ask him if he's ever talked to the press about anything, about any subject, or any of those individuals in that office, including Mr. Mueller, I suspect a number of people would be nabbed. And so the fact is Mr. Mueller's office did not want a leak investigation. There was every basis to have a leak investigation if, in fact, the Justice Department believed this story was accurate. So they didn't release this rare statement just because they're good people. They released it to cover their asses because they don't want a leak investigation. Again, not related to this case in particular, which was absurd, but they don't want to be asked about it.
Let me ask you this, because I think this is really important here. You know, we learned this week that the general counsel under James Comey, Mr. Integrity's FBI, is now under a criminal investigation. We already have learned his deputy director is under a criminal investigation.
For leaking.
We now know that everybody in the Justice Department, all of these figures that have been what we call the deep state, that they all were warned, as we were discussing with Professor Dershowitz, about Hillary paying for the dossier and Steele hating the president, and it also not being verified or corroborated. But it became the basis of FISA warrants. All those people that signed on to it, including, by the way, Mueller's office knew all of this. And I'll add one thing. Remember, Bruce Orr, the messages we had after Christopher Steele is fired for lying and leaking, he's trying to feed Mueller information through Bruce Orr. And I'm wondering...
Yeah, but you know...
Go ahead.
You know, Professor Dershowitz is right. The way you handle this is through some kind of an evidentiary hearing, a contempt hearing. And so the question is, Sean, where are these FISA judges? Why aren't they holding hearings? Why aren't they getting to the bottom of this? They know all this information is out. No, they all know that a contempt was committed against the court, which means the justice system. There's simply no question about this now. And so there's a serious question about the functioning of the federal judiciary in this respect and these FISA court judges. But I want to get back to today. The media have disgraced themselves. They tomorrow will say, we said if the story's true. You don't go with a story if you don't know if it's true. You don't go with a story if you don't know if you can verify it. And this has been going on since before President Trump was president, and it's unique to him, and it's a disgrace. They were talking about impeaching him, indicting his kids. I think the American people believe in fairness and justice. They believe in a free press, but the free press apparently doesn't believe in a free press. And over at CNN and MSNBC and these other outlets, they really need to clean house. And until these executives get off their high horses, try to take out the President of the United States, these anchors, these hosts, these reporters, they're a joke. They drag down the entire media and they drag down the country, and they did
Mark,
it again
let me point out something. For 2017 alone, the Washington Examiner, I have, and I put it on my website, Hannity.com, 47 printed pages of fake news stories in a 1 year period of time, 2017. 47 printed pages. And what they do is they don't even, they just go from one hysterical report to the next. They're never held accountable. It's hurting the country, Mark.
It's hurting the country, and it's all intended to drive towards impeachment, and it's even more. They're dragging down our republic by dragging down our president. This is our president. You want to try and take him out? Wait for the next election. You don't try and do all these nasty things, all these lies and all the rest. You don't call our president Hitler and Stalin and a racist and 1,000 other things. And you don't run with every phony story that comes across your desk. This is yellow journalism. It's as low as I've ever seen. And it's going to continue to get lower unless Time Warner, unless Comcast, unless all these other major corporations get control of their newsrooms and clean them up.
You know,
and by the way, can't you find a better photo of me than that one you're putting on TV?
I didn't pick the photo. Is that all you want to talk about?
No.
Life, Liberty, Levin, Sunday night. Great. Unbelievable. We'll see you soon. Mark Levin. All right, the White House responds. When we come back, the president's attorney, Jay Sekulow, reacts to all of the day's events and breaking news. Straight ahead. All right, this is a Fox News alert. President Trump's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, weighing in on BuzzFeed's fake report on Twitter, writing, quote, I commend Bob Mueller's office for correcting the BuzzFeed false story that President Trump encouraged Cohen to lie. I asked the press to take heed that their hysterical desire to destroy this president has gone too far. They push this without critical analysis all day. Hashtag fake news. We go now to the president's attorney, Jay Sekulow, also the chief counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice. You know,
hey, Sean.
This is how it went all day, Jay. Well, we haven't verified it ourselves, but if true, and this is both the Democrats and the media, but if true, and then they go to impeachment, and this is now going on for 2 straight years, false report after false report, conspiracy theory after conspiracy theory.
You know, I think one of the networks, one of the other networks, I think I counted in the course of almost a little less than an hour, 17 or 19 times, they said if this was true, if this happened, if these facts could be verified, which we haven't been able to verify, this would be a crime. But that's like saying, you know, if someone robbed a bank, it would be a crime. Well, if someone did rob a bank, it would be a crime. But I think it's important here for a moment to reflect on that this was actually a good day for justice and a very, very good day for the President of the United States. But it's also important to say and to focus for a moment here on what the special counsel's office actually said. And Sean, because, you know, my job as the President's lawyer, as part of the legal team, is to analyze these things and to respond to what was going on, this frenzy that was going on the last 24 hours. And so let me start with what he actually said. This is from Bob Mueller's office. By the way, it's the first time they have spoken publicly about a false news story. This is what they said. BuzzFeed's description of specific statements to the special counsel's office, that's 1, and characterization of documents, that's 2, and testimony obtained by this office regarding Michael Cohen's congressional testimony are not accurate. So it's 3 things. It's the description of the specific statements to the special counsel's office, the characterization of the documents that were the basis upon which the media speculation started, and the testimony obtained by the office regarding Michael Cohen's cooperation with the special counsel's office. All of that, as reported in the report today, are not correct. And this isn't coming from me. It's not coming from the American Center for Law and Justice. It's not coming from my law firm. Who's it coming from? It's coming from the special counsel's office, Bob Mueller's office. So I think Rudy Giuliani is right in saying that this was the right thing to do, and I'm glad they did it. Now, where does that leave us? So, Sean, here's what I think this is. This is a warning sign to everybody that the speculation with no factual backup is dangerous for our republic. And look, I've been dealing with this, as you know, for more than 24 hours, about 24 hours. Actually, it started last night about 10 o'clock, so about an hour from now. And the end result of this was the right thing, but it took us 24 hours to get the right thing. But I think it's important for everyone that's watching to realize that the speculation and the media anxiousness to report out of the gate has got to stop. But there's also another message in all this, and you said this in your monologue. Look what is transpired. People say, is there any action being taken on the people that are doing wrong deeds, illegal conduct? Well, let's look at it. James Baker, the general counsel of the FBI, is under investigation for what? Leaking to the media.
Andrew McCabe. Let me just say something. But, Jay, we just learned that this week. Comey's FBI.
Right.
You have his deputy, Andrew McCabe, is under a criminal investigation. Now the general counsel.
For leaking. For leaking. This is important. For leaking. They're not supposed to be doing that, Sean. And they're leaking documents. And they're leaking testimony. And they're leaking statements. And this is absolute. That's why they're fired and under investigation.
You know, the media bias can be both ways.
We got to focus on that. Yep.
False reporting, which we have documented, and I believe the president has forever branded, rightly so, fake news as such, and for them to ever get their credibility back, I don't think it's even possible. You know, look at this. We learned about the General Counsel Baker. We know about Andrew McCabe. We know about Strzok and Page. They were even appointed to Mueller's team, along with Jeannie Ray, who used to be Clinton's attorney, and the pit bull Andrew Weissman. But here's my question. Bruce Orr, we learned under oath, in testimony, released this week, that in fact he warned everybody about the phony dossier. He warned that Clinton paid for it. He warned that Christopher Steele had a hatred of the president, and he warned that it wasn't verified or corroborated. But it still became the bulk of information. Is that for FISA warrants?
I've always asked the question of what happens to the evidence that was gathered during the course of the proceedings, the investigation, that were outside legal parameters, not appropriate, not legal, because it's called the fruit of the poisonous tree. But let me tell you something else about the Bruce Orr testimony. Bruce Orr did say that he told the higher-ups at the FBI, my gosh, he was the number 4, that, in fact, that the dossier was biased, that it was paid for by political operatives. But his wife worked for the political operative company that put the dossier together. And there's also, simultaneous with his mea culpa from Bruce Orr, is what? Are text messages that have been released between Bruce Orr and who? Christopher Steele, the so-called British spy. And that is a plea for Bruce Orr and Chris Steele, for Steele to come back to work to the FBI right after James Comey's fired. Now, ask yourself this question. Why was Christopher Steele fired by the FBI in the first place? And you know what the answer to that one is? A leak to the media. So this is, look, the illegitimacy of the inquiry from the outset has been is incredible, but it's the consistency of getting information out here. So again, while I'm glad that the office of the special counsel's office today issued this very clear 3-part statement, and that's how you have to analyze it, and some of these networks trying to parse it, it's almost funny watching it. But here's what I think is important. What's the consistent theme through this? Illegal, inappropriate leaks. And who started leaking as well? James Comey. He said he gave his notes of a conversation he had with the President of the United States to a friend of his to leak to the press so he would get the appointment of a special counsel, which lo and behold happens. So let me tell you something. That's what I want everybody focusing on tonight. It's this consistent pattern of leaking. And that's going on at the highest. It's not the individual FBI agents. In mass, they do a great job. But the Strzok and Page thing, someone explain this one to me. There are emails that are missing, or text messages, from the time that they were at the special counsel's office, and the resource officer at the special counsel's office says, well, we didn't really check the material, and one phone was left, and the other phone was recirculated, and no one checked the text messaging. So, look, again, I am glad that Bob Mueller's office issued this statement. It was called for. It was due. It was the appropriate thing to do. But there are a lot of questions that are still not answered by the activities that have taken place here. Now, again, it's a good day for the president, great day for the president, great day for the country, not such a great day for the media. And I caution friends of mine in the media today to watch this, be very careful here.
You told me early today.
Unsourced, unverified, I told you that. Yes.
We saw the two BuzzFeed. One reporter says, yeah, we saw the evidence. The other said we didn't. And, of course, they released the dossier without any corroboration. You know, here's the dangerous part and the serious part of all of this. It's hurting the country. This is an obsession. Yeah. Congress, you know, if verified, impeachment. This has been the burden on this president now for 2 years. And it was interesting to watch today the media also thinking obstruction of justice is a really serious issue while ignoring the deletion of subpoenaed emails, bleach pit, hammers, SIM cards removed. And, you know, we saw last week, Democrats say manufactured crisis, media says manufactured crisis again and again. It's almost as if they want this to happen so bad they cannot get over this obsession, which really is hate and really hurts the country.
Well, look, this impacts the president, the office of the presidency, and the entire country. Well, let me say something. If you looked at the other networks, which I know you don't do, but in my job I got to look at all of it, right? So when I saw that,
I'm sorry that you have to do
today,
that. That's punishment.
Yep, I did. And you know what
double.
it said though? Special counsel's office challenges BuzzFeed's statements regarding the president directing someone to lie. That's all I needed to say for the day. There you go.
Right. Jay Sekulow,
Good day
attorney
for
for
the
the president. Chief counsel Joe DeGeneva is going to weigh in. Dr. Sebastian Gorka weighs in on the media's embarrassing latest botched fake news report. It is now a chronic problem. We'll continue.